Hello, Siobhan Holt here, Deputy Editor of PRWeek UK. This is an interview I had with Adam Leyland, Editor-in-Chief of trade title The Grocer. This episode was recorded back in December for PRWeek's Future of the Media series. The video was published on prweek.co.uk and we're now rolling out the series on our podcast feed. Adam discusses, among other things, what stories work best for The Grocer, how the B2B title is used in AI. He discusses social media and the trade title strategy. He also explained how UK regulations for food and drink high in fat, salt or sugar is a role for PR in storytelling. I really enjoyed talking to Adam. I hope you enjoy listening to it too. Welcome, Adam. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, brilliant.
Could you begin by explaining what The Grocer is and how long you've worked there and how your newsroom operates?
Okay, so I have been at The Grocer for almost 20 years, just over 19. But The Grocer itself is a lot older than that. We were established 164 years ago.
Wow.
And we've been the Bible of the grocery trade for all that time, have had such an established position at the heart. Having said that, our proposition has evolved enormously over the years. You know, we were famous once upon a time for our incredible jobs coverage. It's where people found their jobs. But we've reflected every possible media trend over the years, and the role that we play today has evolved with those trends.
Brilliant. So how does your newsroom operate and what do you guys have as part of your armoury, I should say, really?
Well, we're really lucky because we have a very big team of journalists. We have 25 journalists. Well, a combination of editors and reporters, sub-editors, digital and social. Is a team of 25. So we have a real arsenal of journalism, and it's a privilege and a responsibility too.
Yes, absolutely. So then how do the journalists on your team find stories and how has this changed?
Yeah, I mean, there are the old-fashioned ways, networking and so forth, but without question, a couple of key sort of changes in the last 5-10 years. The first is social media, and we are finding stories by keeping an eye on what consumers are saying on social media. I'll give you an example. One of our biggest stories of the year happened earlier this month, which was about the cost of Maltesers being more expensive than the cost of sirloin steak. And this story went nuts. It went all over the nationals. It's gone international as well. And the interesting thing about it is, so the initial insight was that one of my enterprising journalists spotted a comment about this on social media and did some journalism because they claimed that it was cheaper than fillet steak, and it wasn't. But my journalist did the due diligence, worked out what the cost was, and then said, well, actually, it's not more expensive than fillet steak, but it is more expensive than sirloin steak. So that became the story, and we were able to then amplify it, show where, why, and get the levels of response, and developed it from a simple piece of observation on social media into a big story for The Grocer and ultimately a big story for the national media too.
And when you say you shared that, was it just a story on your site? Do you still publish a magazine anymore or not?
Oh gosh, yes. We publish a magazine every single week. We are an absolute outlier in those terms.
Wow, yes.
Especially in B2B.
Yeah.
We are, yes, we continue to publish a magazine. We still have tens of thousands of subscribers to that. So it's a very popular product. And no one wants us to get rid of it, so we're not going to.
Yeah.
And it's very successful commercially too, in terms of lots of healthy advertising. So we're blessed, as I say, in the support we receive and the love that we have for the print product. But we also have lots of other things that we're doing these days. So we have a very vibrant website where we're posting roughly 20 stories web first every single day. We have 26 newsletters that we publish on a weekly basis, a combination of daily and weekly. So there's an exhausting program of newsletters coming out, some hand curated, some automated. And we have, of course, a social media presence in the form of we post, upload our stories and make comments about what's going on, both collectively via our official The Grocer channel handle and also via individuals who post.
Brilliant. And are you on LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook? Or are there any others you tried?
We're on pretty much all of them to some degree. And again, it's changed. The changing face of the media, even social media. You know, the thing that we now these days that we have the most followers and the most engagement via LinkedIn. But in the past, that would have been Twitter/X. That's really tailed off in the B2B sphere.
Yes.
And we're still on pretty much all of the others. And we have different strategies for them as well, like Instagram, different types of stories that we post. So we approach them all in potentially different ways. But without question, LinkedIn has become the go-to from a B2B perspective. And we are a B2B publication. So it's the right channel for us these days.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So then looking at PR and comms, how does that relationship work for you guys? And what advice would you give to make it a stronger working relationship as well?
So I'm asked this question the whole time by PRs.
Yeah.
And we rely hugely on PRs to give us information, and we value their contribution. How could it be better? I could reel off a myriad. So let me just think of a few basics without wishing to teach anybody to suck eggs. It's amazing how much the basics are ignored. So understanding the grocer, who it is, what it does, when it comes out, where it comes out, who the journalists are, what they specialize in. That's 101. But people ignore that so often. I'm ringing about your monthly publication and like, or contacting us about a story that has nothing to do with the grocer, food and drink or anything, and so on and so forth. So many basic errors like that. Being trustworthy and telling the truth is obviously fantastic. We understand that sometimes PR's role is to protect and to control, but that also it needs to understand that we are looking for access. They might be gatekeepers, but what we truly value is access. And for them to enable that builds a far more valuable relationship long term than it always being projected at us and broadcast to us in a one-dimensional way.
Yeah, sometimes as well, you're just fact-checking, and that also can be missed, can't it?
I mean, and there are others like, did you get the press release? Yeah. Or did you get a bounce back? No. Well, in that case, you can assume that I got it. Yeah. I mean, other things. Blind copying us, all of my team in, or 7 members of my team in. And then, you want to be helpful, you want to be polite, you want to be respectful. So you go, well, who else have you sent this to on my team? Because I don't want to start forwarding this to people when you've already sent it to them. And then you discover that, they've sent it to multiple people who are all potentially forwarding it on to the relevant person. But you also discover that they've sent it, although they sent it to 7 people on my team, they haven't sent it to the 2 people that are relevant. So it's due diligence, and it's so basic. It makes such a difference.
Do you guys appreciate a phone call? Because obviously you can get a phone call now, you can get contacted on LinkedIn, you can have an email. What's your preferred method?
Well, I don't want to speak for all of my journalists, but I personally prefer email as a starter, and then you go from there. Phone calls, nobody uses phones for actually phone calls these days, or rarely,
So as news titles are trying to balance 24/7, there's shrinking resources. How should PR teams adjust their strategy to support the newsrooms, would you say?
I'd say the first thing is don't outsource your PR work to AI, because we can spot it a mile off. And we understand there's efficiency drives going on and that budgets are tight or whatever it is. But those who value communication should invest in it and do it properly. And I know of examples, not just from sort of spotting it myself, but also in terms of people I've spoken to in PR who are thoroughly demoralized. And I say, you need to not move out of PR, you need to move agency, get a different boss, because what you're describing to me is horrendous. And if you should not commoditize PR. And we're the same on the Grocer. We don't want to commoditize what we do. We believe in journalism, trusted journalism based on accuracy and authority and facts and so forth, and checking and so forth. And we believe in journalism as opposed to churnalism. We can just all be cribbing each other's stories. We can be relying on AI to do our jobs for us, but it's a downward spiral to hell. And I think we're in a contract with PRs in this. If we all do it, we're all doomed. And we all have a responsibility to stand up for all those values: trust, authority, fairness, accuracy. That they are absolutely prerequisites of journalism.
What we're talking about here is building up that media relations, and we've had reports, haven't we, of fake AIs, and the way to get around that, we're regularly telling comms professionals, is to build that media relations. But how do you do that when a journalist is so busy?
I think you show your human side. I think if you're very transactional about it, I've got a client, I want to get this in the Grocer. You're just a salesperson. And actually, if you help a journalist, if you're polite as well, but if you help them, if you think beyond one story, and if you try to either precede something or with relationship building so that when a story comes, you're more receptive to it as a journalist, or you follow up on it, and not in a kind of did you get the press release way, but you just follow up and engage with them about talking about the market. I always say that the most valuable sources for us are the people who talk and who share stuff and understand how media works in terms of background briefings, off-the-record comments, unattributable sources. All of those are important things. And when you can have that relationship with PRs, that's as valuable as it is when they're well-informed as it is with anyone.
Excellent. We've mentioned their AI technology, and I was just wondering, are you using it at the Grocer, and in what ways?
Yeah, we absolutely are using AI. We're using it, I'd say, carefully and strategically. So the careful bit is that actually there is this issue of hallucination. And we know, I've seen it myself, I have seen a business valued at 20 times its actual valuation, what it was sold for. The actual figure was about 100 million, and somebody said 2 billion. I've seen it with job titles. I've seen it with HFSS regulations and what's in scope, and that's high fat, salt, sugar, what's in scope and what's out of scope. I've seen complete hallucinations, and I've seen them from journalists senior as well as junior. We have policies to ensure that people do not rely on AI for sourcing information. But these days, it's an easy mistake to make, because these days you go to Google and instead of giving you a bunch of links that you potentially can go and explore, it provides you with generative answers. And so the temptation is to go, oh, there it is on a plate for me. It saves me time. The reality is, that we have to remind people of the policy when we see it, but we also have a rigorous fact-checking process, because you can't, as much as you tell people what to do, as I said, it's easy mistake. So as much as you have policies in place about how you should source things, also we have checks in place in the form of, we have sub-editors for every story, and we have editors checking stories as well. So you have a double fail-safe system, we hope. But as I say, it's an easy mistake to make. So that's one side of it. I think the strategic side, there is both, again, even informal, in the sense of we're using tools like Copilot to create headlines. It's really useful. Particularly, some journalists aren't always good at headlines, and you need to have different types of headlines, SEO headlines, clickbaity headlines, and actually tools like Copilot do a really good job there. But the most significant strategic bit for us is that we have used certain AI tools for next-gen search, for example. And it's a really interesting piece where, at the center of the Grocer proposition is trust and authority. And we know about hallucination. And so what we do is we say, look, this next-gen search will search only within the ecosphere of the Grocer. So it will search our content and provide answers from our trusted content. So it's next generation search, where our brilliant journalism is being powered powered by AI. It's AI is not our master. We are trying to master it and control it and use it to the benefit of the user, the subscriber.
So is it something that you're doing on your website for people that visit it? Is that how you use it in that way?
We call it intelligent answers, and we call it Ask IA. So we want to give them, we know that a lot of search engines aren't particularly helpful, whereas this product will mirror the sorts of experience you'll get when you go to Apple or Google or ChatGPT or whatever, but it will do so within our content, and it will, for example, it will filter out opinions. So it won't express an opinion as fact. It doesn't even look at opinion pieces. It looks at news stories and investigations and reports, and therefore delivers that information back. And it's obviously incredibly clever, and it's genuinely useful for people. And you will quite often see the search as one of the top 10 stories in a particular week because people are finding it really useful. And we're sort of going a step further potentially in terms of helping us to identify stories and to help us find new stories. But again, we're doing that in a way where we're not just relying on it. We're not outsourcing the journalism and saying, AI, you take over, you do our stories. We're saying, no, let's let AI help us find stories, and then we'll go, yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know about that. In the old days, as journalists, we used to go through the clips. We used to cut things out and have a look at them and share them around. These days, of course, first of all, you can't just rely on the clips or whatever the digital equivalent is. You can't just rely on the national media. You're looking, as we said earlier, at social media. So there's hundreds of sources. It's too much to monitor it all. But AI can help. And therefore, it's about, okay, let's let it generate that stuff and then let's go to work.
Absolutely. Yeah? It's the balance.
Yeah. So it's not AI doing everything for us. It's using AI as a support, as an enabler where it's appropriate.
And obviously then, in your view, do you think that AI is changing the day-to-day role of a journalist?
I think it's still early days. We're, in terms of that latter development I've just described, that's a sort of sandbox territory for us. There's a couple of vendors that we're working with right now, and we're in the early stages of exploring how we use it and use it scrupulously and rigorously. So it's not something where I let everyone run amok. I've got, you need to control some of these things. I mean, there are other publishers out there who've used AI to take press releases and convert them into stories. Will we do that in the future? I'm not sure. In principle, I'm sort of against it for some of the reasons that I've described earlier around trust and accuracy. And when I've questioned people who have done it, they've said, oh, well, you need to check it once they've done it. And I'm thinking, well, if you need to check it, it's probably quicker to do it yourself in the first place. But also, having said that, there are certain types of stories, like people stories or people appointment, where you can see that we might use AI for a story like that, or even a new product development story. We might. But I think what that does is it means that the joining of the dots, the experience of the journalists can be missing. As much as AI is incredibly intelligent and clever and whatever, it sometimes cannot account for the memories, the experience, the anecdotes of an individual journalist who joined dots up that AI doesn't.
Yeah, the context is completely missing, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. So people have discussed that internally as a possibility, and I don't want to say never, but overall I think we have to master AI, use it to our benefit, not let it master us.
And you've mentioned obviously AI slop, and I said before there's been in the news stories around fake PRs, for example, coming up and fake commentary. And I was just wondering then, where in your opinion is the ethical line on the impact of AI and accuracy?
Yeah, so as journalists, we are responsible for what we write, how we report. And so it isn't just a moral imperative, it's an accountability issue. It's a trust issue. And if we don't have trust, then we have no authority and we are lost as a brand. So our entire premium, our entire value, the reason people trust us over all sorts of other free-to-air services that are out there, stories or journalists or publications that steal our stories from behind our paywall and put them in front of a paywall, or whatever it is that they do, the reason that they come to us and say, you know what, I'm just going to read what it says in the Grocer, is because we don't step over that line. And I just think it's so fundamental. It isn't moral. We've gone from a world where everything had to be double sourced to a situation where there are people who are literally making stuff up, relying on hearsay and publishing it as fact, fake news, etc. It's a dangerous world that we're in. And we at the Grocer are sort of bastions of that integrity and robustness. And that's why we are where we are. If I look at some numbers here, so we're getting on average, about over 1 million page impressions a month. That's extraordinary numbers. And in fact, as much as there is generative AI going on out there that's sort of undermining us in the media, those are figures. A couple of times this year, we've broken our record for all-time traffic. And when I think about, when we had COVID and we all had nothing better to do, and we were doing brilliant journalism then as well, by the way. So there was lots of interest in what we were doing. And we thought we would never exceed the traffic that we scored during COVID. How can we beat that? It fell away. It fell away at a permanently higher level, which was great, but it still fell away. And we thought, well, if it ever exceeds it, it'll be a long time coming before we do that. But actually, here we are, 4 or 5 years down the line, and twice this year we've exceeded our record from COVID, and we're averaging just below our record in COVID. And that's extraordinary, and it's a tribute to our relevant, trusted journalism.
You've mentioned there, though, that there are challenges with the media, and obviously reports show that we're seeing a decline in trust. You've obviously showed there that with the right story, people will come to you for trust. But I'm just wondering, from your perspective, what is the single biggest factor that's contributing to the lack of trust overall in the media? And what responsibility do you think the PR industry has to change this?
So I think the first thing to say is that trust in all sorts of institutions has been undermined by insidious social media divisiveness and undermining. There are some dark forces at work, and you could say that's Russians causing chaos and carnage, but it's equally political movements in the UK, elsewhere, that are undermining the credibility of all institutions, be it the government, be it business, be it the clergy, or be it the Fourth Estate. But there has also been some own goals that the media has committed over a very lengthy period of time. So there is a responsibility, as I say, to be accurate, and it behooves us all not to fall into some dark arts ourselves, not to get lazy and sloppy, but to truly care and believe in what we're doing. I mean, this morning there was a story about Donald Trump and suing the BBC. There is an own goal there. There's hypocrisy but in the lawsuit, but there is an own goal that has been committed by journalists, and you have to have integrity. And there's a lot of journalism out there that doesn't have integrity. And I think probably the same is true of PR, where it's too salesy. You have to pay as much attention to factual accuracy and so forth, and not just wing it. We've seen that specifically as a concern in terms of the food industry because of greenwashing, and there are major concerns. So that fast and loose sort of salesy approach to dramatic headline and so forth, there's a culpability there, there's a responsibility there. You are now liable. So if you make a false claim, PR can land itself in a lot of hot water and incur fines on behalf of clients too. So it's something that I think the industry has to take seriously, the PR industry as well.
Then beyond written articles, then what new media formats do you see as essential for journalism going forward?
Well, you talked about written versus, I suppose, the opposite of that would be broadcast. That's the other obvious one. And for sure, podcasts and vodcasts, less so, but still podcasts have gone nuts, haven't they? Here we are. And they're great. So that's the obvious one, really got different proposition, but very popular. From our perspective, we haven't been that active in this space because it's all free to air. And we have been quite rigorous about trying to keep people inside or trying to tempt people into our lair and make them pay and subscribe, because that's what supports 25 journalists and all the other stuff that we do. But having said that, we can see that podcasts are a really important function and playing an important role, that is, and we are exploring how we can step that up. I mean, I've had a few thoughts about, if we do podcasts, they have to be really high quality, the same standard as everything that we do in print. They have to be deliverable from a consistency basis. So there's that sort of sustainability. I think you can't say we'll do a podcast every month or every 6 weeks or when we feel like it. It has to have that same rhythm and sustainability there. So every week make sense. We're a weekly print publication. It makes sense to have something that is weekly as a podcast. So that's something I'm aiming for. And the other thing is these things need to make sense commercially. If we can't justify the cost through subscribing to them, because that's a very difficult model, then we have to do it through other means, and that probably means sponsorship. And so that's the route we're going to go down. But the number one thing is to get the format right in the first place, because that's what builds the sustainability. So if you have a format that changes from week to week, or you don't know what you're going to do in 3 weeks' time, if you haven't planned it out and it's too up in the air, it might not come out even, that's a problem. And so that sustainability, regularity, people know what they're going to get. You create a format that works, you agree it, and then you roll it out. And then you approach people to hopefully get either from an engagement point of view or from a sponsorship point of view, but it's still both. That's the perfect podcast. And I commend PRWeek for what you're doing, because you're doing all those things. You're doing the weekly podcast and you're making it work commercially. Otherwise you wouldn't be doing it, I'd assume, or at least on some level. Some people use it as a branding tool, and some people are monetizing it successfully. And I see examples of that in the food industry too. And so it's a case of we want some of that, but we want to do it in the right way, to the right standard.
Yeah. And are you also thinking the same with video? Because obviously I think consumer titles are a bit further on with that when it comes to social video and stories.
Yeah, that is the other one. Video, I would say it's social media, and it's shorts. So I look at the future and go, we need to be in video in some way. But I think it's short videos, not long videos. I think that long videos equals podcasts in this day and age. But short videos is short clips. And that could be dicing up podcasts into little memorable quotes. Or it could be other things that we might do in the future. But I think, I look at what people are consuming and go, how can we be engaged in that? How can we make that work for us? And crucially, how can we make that work for our audience, give them information they need, get them engaging with the Grocer as a brand, and then discovering some of the other content that's locked behind a paywall.
When you get a story, and obviously you've got your print, but you've got online, how do you decide which goes where and liaise with PRs on that?
Yeah, well, we were talking about this a minute ago in terms of the media that we have, and I talked about the print and the online, and then the newsletters, and then the social media. So those have been the main channels. And really how we develop them is we're looking to put them web first, particularly if they're breaking news. And so we're pushing them onto online, but then we're creating newsletters for them to get the reach that we need. And then we're posting them on social media too. And then finally, we're taking the best of what we're doing online and putting it into a digest product, which is called the Grocer magazine. And that's the kind of basic workflow these days. There are certain things, the lengthier reports that we do, that we work the other way around. We think about the print first and then move on to converting it as a distribution channel into online. But even there, we're working out how can we change that? How can we, A, publish stuff, complex reports, digital first, and B, if we do it digital first, how will we do it? It shouldn't be the way that we've always done it in print. It should actually look different. For example, it should probably have more data, because you've got an unlimited space. So how do we present data in a more compelling way, in an interactive way? That's one good thing. Polling, we can do that. Let's have mini polls, pulse surveys, whatever you want to call them. And another thing I really like is canvassing opinion from social media and plonking that into articles. So articles, potentially, these sort of reports are potentially long reads, but they're not long walls of text, as I call it. They're really quite interactive and quite dynamic and just different from print. And so that's what we're working on.
So what do you believe is the future for journalism then, and its links with PR?
I think journalism has never been needed as much as it is today, because there is fake news, but a lot of that so-called fake news is real news. We have to stand up for it. But there's so much noise, there's so much hallucination. And actually, if you can make a case for trusted journalism, you have a role. And within that, trade journalism, B2B journalism, is incredibly important to its audience. It is not, as a lot of the stuff out there, just noise. We know from all the research we do into the value of the trade media, we know that our audience truly values what we do. They spend a lot of time with it, they trust it, they rely on it, it informs decisions, it helps them to make decisions, it gives them access to data that they couldn't afford, it gives them first mover advantage if they sign up for certain alerts that are premium services, whatever. There is a huge engagement with what we're doing. And clearly that is facilitated, at least in part, by PR. And so we have a sort of symbiotic relationship. There's sometimes a tension, but there's also an appreciation. And so I think we have a healthy future if we work together as successfully as we can. I think the other thing to say about the trade media is that actually there are, specifically for the food and drink industry, there are some interesting new regulations around healthy fat, salt, sugar, which means that there are brands out there who are trying to launch products, for example, that are HFSS, but can't use traditional media, for example. They can't use TV. Yeah. They can't use social posts.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think there's an incredibly important role for the grocer in giving people a route to market so that our B2B audience can learn about new product development. But also I think there's a role for PR in terms of storytelling. That the importance of storytelling and getting the names of and the work of, the very valid work of major brands whose foodstuffs are high fat, salt, sugar, getting their work out to the media. It's an important role. The work that they're doing, whether it's in terms of the jobs that they're creating, the support they're giving to the community, the manufacturing, the investment. There's lots of things that that HFSS food manufacturers are doing that are important to society and to the growth of the economy. And PR can play a role in telling that story.
Wonderful. Well, I think that's a brilliant place to end it. Unfortunately, then that's all we've got time for. It's been great to hear your insights, so thank you so much for joining us today, Adam. And thanks so much to you for joining and listening. And until next time, goodbye.